Hello and welcome. My name is Steve Pugh, and if we don't know each other, kind of once a week, maybe a bit longer, it depends on how kind of busy and stuff I've got going on. I do something called a growth strategy podcast, and what I try and do is introduce you to interesting people that can hopefully help your business or career, people that can kind of add value and almost are kind of on a similar journey to yourself if you ever have aims and ambitions to either start your own thing, but then likewise talking about like real issues, stuff that's actually happened like this week and next week, and stuff that hopefully you might kind of find interesting, because actually it's often very difficult to find like-minded people when you're busy, when you're grafting away and doing stuff, who to kind of, share their journey, almost talk about stuff that they've done, how they found it. Or likewise, say if you're maybe a bit younger and you're thinking about doing your own thing and maybe school isn't really for you, or you're at uni and you're not sure what you want to do, actually just having people that you can kind of learn from and what their journey was like was hopefully quite interesting. So Scott, who I'm going to introduce you to today, has a fantastic business, which we're going to go really into. It is a lot harder, in my opinion, to start a product-based business, which is what Scott's kind of done with his kind of gin brand. So it'll be really interesting to go into that and problems he's faced and that kind of thing. And then if you join us for the next kind of 40 or so minutes, be hopefully, if you have any comments, please feel to, free to message, and they should pop up on my screen. And then this all gets clipped up and goes onto YouTube and iTunes and Spotify and all of the usual kind of providers as well. So Scott, I'm just going to bring you in. There we go. Everyone can now kind of see you and hear you. Would you like to say hi to everyone?
Hi everyone, my name's Scott, and I own a company called WL Distillery.
And just before, or it was my question when we came on the call, that is a real actual thing. It's not a green screen behind you.
No, that's some of the equipment. It's not in use at the moment because it's getting some work done, but that is a larger version of some equipment that you can use for producing spirits such as gin.
What exactly is it? Almost as an engineer, it looks like some sort of distillation tower or something. It's just a mini version of what you get in chemical plants.
Sorry, I'll just sort of lean out the way a little bit. Yeah, so it's mainly in sort of three parts. So you have the main copper pot still here, which is essentially a large cauldron, which you put all your botanicals and your raw materials on, and then you heat it from the base, and then it becomes a vapor and travels up these pipes. And then depending on what you want to do with it, depends on which way you go. So this is a fractional distillation column, as you say, and each one of these is a smaller version of the still, and it redistills itself through. It's very good for spirits like vodka. It adds strength and purity. This little silver box here is what we call a gin basket. You put your lighter botanicals like floral elements in, and the vapor passes through and takes the flavor, and then to condense it back into a liquid. This is essentially a large cooling tower. The vapor comes in at the top, is met with cold water in a jacket, and then it comes out the bottom as a liquid.
I've got to ask, I know how difficult that would be to point over your shot. How many times have you done that? You must do that once a day.
Surprisingly, no. You notice at the beginning I started going the wrong way, and then I corrected myself.
But what's also quite funny is that, so I did mechanical engineering and we did modules on chemical engineering and how you basically hydrocarbons and how you basically crack chains to get different elements. And it seems actually very similar, but obviously that's for, I guess alcohol is a hydrocarbon, but it's just, it's fascinating how science can kind of be used in different ways and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more science in distillation than I agreed or signed up for at the beginning. It was, you have the equipment, gin comes out, but yeah, there is a lot of variation through temperature, through what botanicals react differently to ethanol, what botanicals react differently to water, what your percentages are, what your mixes are, how much of each botanical goes in. And that's why there's such a nice variety of flavored gins. I mean, realistically, you give the same sort of botanicals to various different distillers and you wouldn't get the same product back after each one, because there's a lot of variation based around the chemistry involved.
No, cool. So before we kind of jump into, I have a general structure of stuff that way I kind of tend to do the interviews. Would you be able to, I think I'll set the scene quite nicely, tell people about the business, what it is that you do, how long have you been set up, just as like a quick summary? I just think it'd be really fascinating to kind of set the scene.
Yeah, so the business was set up during 2019. The process to get equipment, get a site, get all the licenses and the provisions in place to start distillation, because it's not something you can just sort of do in your shed or in your kitchen, or at least you shouldn't anyway. It took a little while, so the initial plan was for us to launch in sort of spring of 2020. That never happened due to the global COVID pandemic, which saw us move to producing hand sanitizer for a few months until the issue with that sort of calmed down, and then we came back and did a sort of soft launch of our gin between the lockdowns, August, September 2020. And then we've just had sort of the last 18 months of producing and getting our products out into the world.
Oh, cool. So I am going to ask you about what you were like growing up and your personality traits and what you were like at school. But just before I do that, how and why did you get into starting a gym business? Where did it come from? What were you doing before? I guess we're just going to skip the first bit, but I do want to come back to it. But I'm just intrigued. What were you doing 3 years ago, 5 years ago?
Well, 3 years ago, I suppose I was just in the initial stage of setting this up. And then 5 years ago, I was leaving a job in the steel industry and going into IT.
Okay.
So my career path's been very sort of varied in different industries and sort of moving through sort of management and operational roles until I got to a stage where I wanted to sort of go alone and do my own thing.
Oh, cool. So what I'm going to do, if you're happy to, is that I love to ask people about what they were like when they kind of grew up, what you were like at school, almost, what point did you, follow your career path? Did you go to uni? Did you not go to uni? And often you do see with entrepreneurs, there are kind of certain character traits which seem to kind of follow through and that kind of thing. And I'm always just genuinely kind of interested. So where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was born and grew up in Sunderland.
Okay, so local. And then what were you like at school? Were you good kid, bad kid, naughty, rebellious?
No, I think I was very sort of straight-laced, did quite well in exams and lessons and was quite good in a variety of sort of subjects, which I sort of carried on through to A-level and degree. I'd like to think I was more of a funnier person when I was younger, but I think that's very, subjective. But no, I wasn't particularly rebellious. I was just very much go to school, do your work, go home kind of thing.
Oh, cool. What did you go to uni to do?
I did archaeology and classics.
Wow. Okay. See, I was going to guess some sort of chemistry, science, engineering, just because of. So so what did you do after uni then? How did you, in that kind of 10, 15-year gap, what happened next?
It's a bit of a strange one because the original plan, I was going to join the Air Force. It's something I'd wanted to do since I was quite young. I was in cadets.
Mm-hmm.
I went flying on weekends, all that kind of stuff. Did A-levels, and then during the recruitment process, they said, if you come in with a degree, you'll get promoted quicker and you'll get more money. So go and do a degree you'll enjoy and you can fall back on when you retire in 40 years or whatever. So that was the plan. But unfortunately, I graduated during the financial crisis in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So recruitment for the armed forces was stopped. Jobs within archaeology and universities were cut down due to funding. So I was kind of forced to go into the real world and get a proper job.
But I was hit by something similar. So I graduated a few years before, but I went into construction, and again, 2008 financial crisis. It all just stopped. It just tanked. So I kind of be there. And then just out of interest, because I think it'd be an interesting kind of topic. How did you find that process? So a lot of us, including me, obviously, you go through your career, you kind of go through uni, and you almost have an idea about what you're going to do next, and then something changes. How did you find that process? Was it difficult? Were you just trying to find what you'd enjoy?
I think initially everything had been mapped out for so many years and you were planning towards a certain thing and there was no sort of backup. There was no like, this is what you're going to do. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to be in 10 years. And that was all sort of almost taken away overnight. So I think initially it was a little bit difficult to sort of go away from the fact that you had that mindset. Bearing in mind the roles I wanted to go for in the RAF were age specific. So if I wasn't in within 18 months, I was too old anyway. So I was not eligible. So it took a lot of soul searching and a lot of resilience. And to be fair, at that time anyway, there wasn't many jobs thick on the ground. So it was a case of just trying to get into a job and sort of continue on and maybe look at doing flying commercially or, continue on and have a career path somewhere else.
Yeah, cool. So what was your kind of first job? What did you go into next?
My first job at university, I worked for 6 months with the National Trust at a lighthouse in Whitburn.
Oh, cool. What kind of thing?
I think the role was classed as the Education and Communities Officer. So I was there to do the historical interpretation of the site, help with the volunteers, do the guided tours, do a lot of the outreach programs with the school, education work, stuff like that.
Oh, cool. Sounds quite interesting. So then fast forward me through your career almost to the point where, at what point, I guess you were working in different roles. Did you think, I want to do my own thing? What was that kind of process like? I'm intrigued.
I suppose it came off the back of having a few jobs where I wasn't particularly happy and the people who I worked for weren't particularly great. And it was just a sort of case of, without trying to sound particularly petty, I could do this better, or I could do my own thing. And it just got to a point where there was an opportunity for me to sort of take that leap, and it seemed the right time to do it.
No, cool. So why gin? Why didn't you start a photography business, or I don't know, anything? What was it that kind of got you into that industry?
Well, I mean, I've always enjoyed alcohol in a non-alcoholic way. I enjoy how things are made, processes, and quite like the engineering side. I spent a lot of time in steel manufacture. That was sort of the job between the lighthouse and IT. So it was very practical stuff. We used to make steel cages, which went into buildings all across, Europe, like the Tyne Tunnel, embassies down in London, even the new passport office on the Durham Riverwalk. But I think realistically what I did was, when I was at this stage where I could potentially go and do my own thing, I just wrote a list of all the things I liked and all the things I didn't like, and the things I thought I was good at, and the things I knew I wasn't good at, and sort of went from there. And I was fortunate enough to do a course in Sunderland, which was on practical distillation, which started off as more of an interest in that and finding out how things are made. I'd been on a few holidays, where you do tours around breweries and distilleries. Like, this is actually very interesting when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it. I wonder if it's, it's something you could do yourself. And then it just sort of developed from there.
Wow. So how, I think this would be a really interesting bit to kind of clip up, but almost so how did you go from, I guess you were still working, but then to actually start to think, I'm tempted to kind of do this myself. How did you come up with the name? What was that kind of process to actually kind of make the jump? Because I think it's always easy, to get an idea, but it takes balls to really kind of jump and make the leap and make it real. So I'm just intrigued how you kind of find that process.
I think realistically, the process to go into the company full time was very much, 50% my decision, 50% out of my hands, because I was, in a job I didn't like. It was long hours. It was quite punishing. There was no sort of reward for it, and it was just a bit of a grind. And it gets to a point where you're just like, well, no, I don't want this. This isn't my next 25, 30 years. So not long after I did the course, I started seriously looking into obviously the processes and how to get things going, and then it just sort of snowballed from there. Because once you do one, you sort of automatically move on to the next process, because you need to get all these things in place to allow you to actually manufacture.
No, cool. Sounds good. So give people the kind of the elevator pitch for the brand, because obviously your website is really super impressive, and we're going to talk about branding and marketing and that kind of thing as well. But almost, if you were to describe to someone in 30 seconds what you're all about, what your mission is, why you exist, what makes you special, would you be happy to kind of share that?
I mean, I'll certainly give it a go. I suppose realistically, the business itself was set up to allow me to showcase to people a variety of flavors of gins, some that we find exciting, and really to give people sort of a taste of the Northeast. Our first gin that came out was based around stuff that grew in my granddad's garden. So it's like apples, it's pears, it's blackberries and raspberries. It has a really sort of personal touch, and I find that's very much our sort of key indicator. And you tend to get that with a lot of gins when they've got a sort of backstory and things like that, or just products in general. It's the sort of personal touch, I find.
Cool. Because did you see, because I used to drink more than I do now, but almost it felt like maybe 4 years ago. So, there was almost a big change and an uplift in like the craft beer, locally produced, spirits and that kind of thing. Almost, have you found that there almost has been a change that, that's a market and a growing market people really want to kind of buy into?
I think there's always been a scope around local craft breweries and things like that. Most places tend to have one. The push around sort of shop local over the last few years has certainly helped things like that. But realistically, you are right about spirits. It was an overnight thing, primarily because the law changed in manufacturing, which is why you saw a sudden expanse of craft distilleries.
What was the change in the law? Was it just to allow smaller producers to do stuff, or was it?
Well, without trying to go into too much detail, so in case I get the figures wrong, the original laws that were in place had been there for quite some time. The laws were originally brought in the early 1800s, I think, to stop small scale production of gin because it wasn't easy to tax. So back in historical times, every pub might have had a still in the back. Every country house made their own kind of spirit, stuff like that, and that was scaled back and brought in line with certain laws so that it could be taxed and so it could be safe, because distillation of things like ethanol isn't exactly 100% foolproof. There is options for things to go awry. So those laws were brought in place, and it really meant that only companies that could produce extremely large quantities were allowed to function within the law.
Okay.
So an argument was brought forward that, there's no restrictions like this for beer, there's no restrictions like this for wine. For an industry, the spirits, it's not really working, and we can't sort of grow and develop. So once that law was changed and the manufacturing levels were decreased, it allowed a lot of craft distilleries to pop up, which is why you've seen probably, I think it was 10 years ago, maybe the law was changed, there was a bit of a spike there, and then again 5 years ago. So yeah, it is almost overnight, but there's sort of reasoning behind it.
Yeah, of course. Fascinating. So in terms of, your business, when you kind of created the brand, I'm always really kind of passionate about branding, just because it's that kind of thing of almost, it's your window to the world. It's how you communicate your values and your visions and what you're all about and what you want to look like and feel like and sound like and that kind of thing. Because that's largely, how is your business kind of set up? Is it mostly B2B or B2C? How do you kind of sell to customers?
Originally, it was supposed to set up to be more of an even spread, but due to sort of COVID, we went heavily towards B2C, because realistically, all of our B2B customers were shut or going through periods where they couldn't operate. So we're starting to see it sort of swing a little bit back the other way now that pubs and restaurants have returned and people are starting to go back out. But realistically, we set up the idea is just to supply a product that we think people would like and they'd like to share with their friends, with their relatives, So we're quite happy to sell it to one bottle to an individual, or quite happy to sell bottles to bars and restaurants for people to enjoy while they're out.
No, cool. I'm intrigued actually when you were saying about how even if you gave different people the same ingredients, depending on how they produce it and distill it and do different things, it will kind of taste different. Do you have any like particular brand or style or anything that you kind of pride yourself on?
I'm proud of all our products, to be fair. Our first edition won 3 international awards within the first 3 months of launch, which we're really pleased with, and especially as we were competing against some very well-established brands and brands from across the world, which people, would see on a shelf and instantly know what they are. Production-wise, we tend to do everything in one go, which is everything in the pot to start off with, and then there's no alteration. There's nothing added or taken away at the end, which is more towards the traditional London dry style. But no, I think it's just about making it seems a little bit personal, because obviously you've thought of an idea, you've created this product, you've developed it, you've tweaked it, you've had all these weeks and months where you make different products and they don't work, or they don't quite taste right. So it's just really great to finally get to a product that you're quite happy to give to someone and say, try this, I think you'll like it.
No, cool. It's fascinating. And just from as an engineer, and I work with lots of manufacturing kind of companies, is it, I guess, not serial production? Do you make batches? Is that how you kind of make your product?
Yeah, with us being like a small artisan distillery, we make it in batch production. So much product goes into the still and so many bottles come out each time. So we're classed as a small batch, really, because we only make sort of small individual batches as we need, as we sort of go along. Yeah. I mean, there is obviously large distilleries out there where it's continuous and the equipment run, processing constantly, but no, we're very much small batch. Yeah.
No, cool, fascinating. So one of the passions that we kind of have in common is basketball. And one of the things that I believe, am I correct to say that you sponsor the Newcastle Eagles or the ladies?
Yes, we sponsor the WBBL team, that's correct, yeah.
Oh, cool. And what I was kind of, almost pick your brains on is that for any smaller business, any business, you always have ways and means and different things to almost get the word out, raise awareness, that kind of thing. How and when and why did you choose to start to sponsor the team? And almost how else do you kind of promote the business to kind of raise awareness?
I mean, the sponsorship of the team is a bit of a funny one, to be fair, because it's more of a personal thing. Again, the team actually came out and did some work with my daughter in her primary school, and she got quite into basketball. She'd had a session. She's like, I want a basketball, and then she started taking me down the courts near home, and was getting progressively better and better each week until I was, getting hustled by her. But during, again, going back to COVID, there was posts put out on social media about the women's team needing support from local businesses, needing support from individuals to sort of continue through sponsorship or whatever. And I was talking to my daughter about it, and she was like, "Oh no, you've got to do it. You've got to help them. Got to be a women's team, this kind of stuff." So that's sort of where we sort of went down the option with that, and we had a conversation with them and ended up coming on board as one of their sponsors.
No, it's very cool. I must say, it's one of the things that it still blows my mind. I know football, Premier League especially, is a different league, but when you have the billboards which go around the pitch, it still blows my mind that actually different people around the world see different things, even though it's the same camera feed. And one of my former guests, Chris, was saying actually the technology to do that was kind of pioneered 15, 20 years ago. But just it's fascinating. But just in terms of a way to both align with a team and kind of what they do. And, I'm really, kind of into the community ethic and, that kind of thing. I'm a big fan of the Eagles and what they kind of do. And I'm not quite there yet for what I do, just because that, all the money goes into other things, but I'm not against it in the future. I was just fascinated to kind of, see it. And then how else do you kind of promote the business? Do you have Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook?
We're not quite Snapchat and sort of TikTok savvy, but we do have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we have dabbled in the odd YouTube video doing sort of cocktail videos or promoting our products through that.
Because one of the things that we spoke about before we kind of started, we're talking about photography. And as someone that is well into my cameras, lighting, my first business was a photography business, I'm really kind of into that. And you were saying how you've just done, was it a social media kind of photography course? Would you be happy to kind of just talk people through what that kind of means to the business and how you use it and that kind of thing? I just think it'd be really interesting that people often worry that you need to invest 20 grand in kit and have certain things done, when actually, if you're looking to build trust and stuff with an audience, sometimes pictures on your phone in situ in a bar are better because they're real, if that makes sense. So I just don't know what your take was on that.
No, definitely. And the thing I was doing this morning, it was arranged through a shop in Durham called Discovering Durham, which showcases local brands and products. We're stocked in there, as is a lot of other locally produced things, and they put on a course this morning, just a short introductory thing with a photographer to showcase the best way to take product and brand photography on your camera phone, because realistically, small businesses, we've all got phones, we've all got quite good cameras on, and as you say, with a physical product, especially with it being alcohol, we tend to see it more in bars and in restaurants. So when we're in a new area, it's always great to take a photo with it next to a glass and things, and that really showcases where it is and what the product's about, rather than having a lot of sort of set up pictures and stock photos. It's very nice to actually see the physical product in an actual place where you can buy it, and it also helps promote the location, it helps promote the brand. And it was just nice to be able to, even just some little sort of tips and tricks, because not everyone's a photographer. We've all got quite good cameras on our phones, but even just little sort of tweaks here and there can really make a difference to your photos. And I think that's really helpful for like small businesses, especially with one-man bands, because if you're selling a physical product, you want it to look as best as possible. If it's a blurry photo in the dark, it's not going to get people to become interested in it.
No, cool. One of the things that I'm interested to talk about, if you are, is almost so how long have you been running now? So 2 years, give or take?
To be honest, it's hard to keep up. Time just sort of like keeps on slipping by. I suppose, yeah, we've hit the 2-year mark now, I think.
Yeah, cool. Because what I was going to say is that almost how was it what you expected, even with COVID? And if not, what was different about actually kind of running the business and doing it versus what you thought it was going to be like?
I mean, that's quite a difficult one, because it's kind of hard to separate the COVID element to the sort of running a business, because obviously nobody's business plan had global pandemic in any year, certainly not year one. But I suppose the good thing about running the business is, especially when you're on your own, you wear a lot of hats and you learn very quickly what you're good at and what you're not good at, and where you need to potentially outsource or where you need to develop some more skills. I suppose I saw the business developing along a little bit of a different line to what it has, but it's still developed, and it's expanded, and we've had our products out and about, and people are really enjoying them and liking sharing them with their family and stuff like that. So that was the element that we sort of wanted to focus on and where we wanted to aim. I suppose the other bits is basically just sort of breaking into the market. We expected that to potentially be a little bit easier and a little bit quicker. But again, that's generally down to the fact that a lot of places have been shut for so long.
No, it's a valid point. It's that balance of when knowing how difficult it is to produce something. Like, I love your how much time and effort realistically did you go into things like bottle choice? And, all the tiny little details that most people, when they receive a product, they think it just comes and that's it. But, how did you kind of go through that process? Did you look at 50 different bottles? Did you go on cost? I'm just trying to intrigue, about the process of developing a new kind of product from scratch.
No, I mean, you are right. There was a lot of elements that go into that, bottle shape being one of them. We went to various different suppliers, got a collection of bottles, and then you get them sort of based on shape and size and whether they'll work with the equipment that you've got, which is a good factor, which obviously we found out after the fact when we got bottles that wouldn't fit on the machine that we use for bottling, which was great. And then you've got to sort of break into the other elements of, will people like this when they pick it up? Will it sort of stand out on the shelf kind of thing, which is why we went with a nice sort of square long bottle. It was very elegant. It was very nice. And for our second gin, we've gone with a more sort of stockier square bottle, primarily because it's a nice shape. It works well with the branding. Our labels go around, which is quite nice. It's different to the usual sort of round bottles that you see. And with them being shorter and stockier, they fit better in packaging and things as well. So there's also a reduction in packaging and things like that, which we like to try and work into the products as well.
Because I always find it funny that the amount of detail and time that I'll spend looking at tiny little things that nobody else will ever notice. But it's your baby, it's your thing that you've kind of built from scratch, and it's kind of and then what's the dream for the business? Where would you love to be in, say, 5 years, 10 years?
I think realistically, the 5-year, 10-year plan is still very much the same as we set up, like to continue to expand, bring on more staff, branch out into other products, potentially some complementary products that go along quite nicely with the gin, and just to build a nice size business, which then can be, passed on in the future if I retire, and just to keep producing our products and producing new products that people will enjoy.
No, cool. I appreciate it. I think it's when you there's two different levels of when I set up my business and I started to trade as a sole trader. I was just acting as a consultant on time for a long time. And whilst that's still difficult to get off the ground and get revenue coming in and stuff, when you actually go to make a physical product and you have to create the product, source all the materials, sort your supply chain out, have it made, solve all the problems when it was made. And it's a really long, difficult kind of process. And it is a lot harder than a lot of people kind of think. But when you kind of go through that process, it's the constant iteration to constantly improve and tweak and hone and trying to figure out where do you sit in the market is almost, for me, part of the fun of it, because it's when you said at the start about how it's always interesting to, like, what do you want to do for the next 20, 30 years? How for me, I'd like to have a problem to solve that, ironically, there's a phrase called ikigai, which is Japanese, and it's all about finding something which is part of your passion, but people will pay for it and you can build a business around it. But actually, almost true happiness comes through something that you can never solve. It'll never be perfect. There's always tweaks, changes. So the COVID happens, the recession happens, and it's that kind of the fun, I guess, of learning and evolving. And then how actually, just on a competition element, how closely do you track your competitors to look at different types of gin or where you can kind of differentiate in the market? Or do you focus, I guess, like an artist would, purely on your own kind of stuff and just get that as good as it can be?
I think realistically it's the second one. We didn't spend a great deal of time, researching all the other competition, what everyone's doing, all that kind of stuff. Because again, it goes back to the sort of element of people making different things. Other companies are not necessarily direct competition. Yes, they make a product that's similar to ours, but all of our products are very different. They're very unique. You know, we have a flavor at the moment, which is watermelon and licorice. It's very polarizing as a flavor. It's delicious, but people see licorice and go, I don't like licorice. And you're like, well, like, that's fair enough. They're never going to like licorice.
But
You know, there's another product out there that they would like, and we're not directly competing with anyone else for that. So no, the focus was solely on making the best physical product that we could make that people would enjoy.
Oh, cool. That's profitable, hopefully. You know, it's always that one bit that just makes sure it's kind of there. So one of the things that I always like to ask people, and just part of the process, but it's probably my favorite kind of bit on YouTube, is asking people two kind of questions towards the end. And I think that people get real value in this because actually it's a way to kind of, you know, share some of your experience and what you've done. And it could be from any kind of point in your career. But what's the best piece of advice you've ever had?
Well, I mean, that's a difficult one because it's very subjective, isn't it? Advice. I mean, it's really hard to pin it down because I suppose advice is sort of based around the situation that you're in at the time and whether you take it or whether you don't. I tend to find I've always learned better through situations and experience. So it's not really a good answer, to be fair. I don't really have sort of anything lined up, you know, like, you know, always do this or never do this or watch this and then this will kind of happen. So I don't really know, to be fair, because I suppose, again, advice is very much based around the situation. The situation that I would have been in that I received advice for may not be the same situation somebody else is, you know, even if they are in the same situation, that kind of advice may not.
Fair enough.
May not help.
If you were to give advice to your younger self then, so you can pick any point in your career, you could go back and have a word in the ear of that person at that time. Could be, you know, when the recession hit, or when they didn't get the job at uni, or when you started the business. If you were to give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
I think realistically, I probably would have went back to probably just before I started working when I was in college, and probably advised to just be more confident in myself. Because back then, careers advice wasn't particularly thick on the ground, and it was very much the same for everyone. You know, go to college, go to uni, get a good job, stick in 40 years, retire with a watch. And that's not the job market now, and it wasn't the job market shortly after I graduated. The world had sort of changed, and I should have really maybe seen that a little bit earlier and sort of took it on the chin and not wasted so much time in certain careers or certain jobs where, you know, like, you put the work in, it'll pay off, because realistically sometimes it doesn't. So I think I probably would have maybe not said, you know, start a business at 17, but certainly be a little more resilient and look for more options, and don't put all your hopes on somebody else, because that's how it used to work in the past.
Yeah. How do you find almost being in control of your own destiny? Because I think some people will love it and some people will hate it. It's just, it's
50% exciting, 50% terrifying, because at the end of the day, if something's gone wrong or something hasn't worked out, realistically, you don't then go home and, you know, that problem will still be at work tomorrow and you can fob it off to somebody else in the department. It's, you know, it's your kind of thing. But then equally, the successes are great as well. You know, only after a few weeks of launching, was fortunate enough to go into Fenwick in Newcastle and showcase our gin as part of that Christmas market, and that was a great experience, being able to talk to people and share the products, and just to see the absolute delight of people buying Christmas gin and knowing that they're going to take it home, they're going to wrap it up, they're going to give it as presents for people. So that was a great, you know, experience, and you can sort of like really enjoy those highs, but it also, you know, there's also lows that come along with that as well.
Yeah, cool. Well, I've really enjoyed kind of talking, and especially when you were saying about how, you know, the awards you won after launch, and that must be such great kind of fulfillment when you take a punt, you see if it works, and actually when to get external validation on what you're trying to do must be quite cool. I'm not at that point yet. I haven't actually entered any awards and stuff yet, but it must be nice, because there's so much self-doubt and stuff happens when you launch your own thing and it's not quite going as well as you hoped, and that actually, no, that must be kind of pretty cool. And I've really enjoyed almost the story about how, you know, creating gins, and also some of the challenges that you must have had when the bottles don't fit and things just don't quote to plan and that kind of thing as well. Is there anything you would like to talk about or plug before we go?
No, I mean, I'd be remiss not to shamelessly plug our gin, of course, which is available from our website. And we have our lovely Valentine's range, which is out at the moment. But that's pretty much it. If anyone wants to obviously follow us on social media and join seeing our journey, over the last 18 months and what we're sort of working towards over the next 12 months, that'd be great.
Cool. Well, thank you for your time. It's been nice to I can hear your phone going, not your phone, I think it's your email going mental. It's fine. But no, it's been good to kind of catch up and just learn a bit more about the business. And then likewise, I'll definitely keep an eye out just for, what happens next. And just, I like to see good Northeast businesses kind of do well. And likewise, just it's that journey of when we've had previous calls and you've given me a few little tips about different things. And it's that kind of thing of just, I guess all kind of supporting together and just being in on it. And, best of luck with it. And if you ever need anything, just shout.
Thanks very much.
Cool. Well, cheers, Scott. And I will speak to you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.